This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker, one of our favorite journalists, Cash Michaels, former Supreme Court Justice Bob Orr, and syndicated columnist and author John Hood. Well, welcome to program number 996. On this week's show, we're going to ask our panel to discuss a court decision on taking private property without compensation and other pending court cases. We'll talk about 1,000 jobs paying as much as $100,000 going unfilled and the skills gap in our state. And we'll talk about Forbes magazine's listing our state as #1 for business in the nation. Plus, as always, we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. As we head into the last month of 2017, there's several unresolved court cases that could impact us. We want our panel to discuss some of them, especially the recent verdict by the Court of Appeals regarding the MAP Act. In planning for future highways, North Carolina DOT notified property owners they were in the corridor for future roads and essentially prevented the landowners from either selling or developing their property. Many, especially in Guilford and Forsyth County, sued, saying this was an illegal taking without any compensation being paid. In ruling in favor of the property owners, Court of Appeals Judge Phil Berger said the constitutional right to just compensation when the state takes an individual's private property rights for public use will not be suspended on the mere fact that it may be expensive. Bob Orr, I'd like for you to comment on this ruling.
Well, it was a very well-written opinion by Judge Phil Berger, Jr., and it really was a procedural issue whether the DOT had the right to appeal early on in the trial process. And I think the Court of Appeals was a little irritated with the Attorney General's office and DOT because they said, look, this is some technical argument that you think you've got a right to appeal, which is just going to slow down these people getting the proper compensation. So we're sending it back to the trial court. So that's where it is. But this is one of those issues that I think the legislature could probably fix and save everybody a lot of time and money.
If they would.
If they would.
Now, yeah. Cash, I think the question is this going to be appealed to the Supreme Court?
More likely or not. Lawyers love appealing stuff, don't they? so more likely than not, yeah, as simple as that.
So, Dennis, there were 211 plaintiffs, all total, in this case. Are we looking at the state potentially having to dole out millions of dollars to pay these folks?
It's possible, and rightfully so. I mean, when you tie up someone's land where they can't sell it, and they just are stuck with it, they have to have some rights to compensation for that. That is an unjust taking, in my opinion, and so I think there could be a very big chance that they will have to pay out big money for that.
John, Bob Orr says that the legislature may come in and fix this, but how might it impact future road construction?
Well, it will make it more expensive, or at least they'll have to plan for the expenses more appropriately. As Dennis was getting at, you can't announce we're going to build this road sometime in the distant future. You can't develop it, you can't do anything with it, you can't sell it, and then force the landowners to sit around and wait to be compensated. I mean, that's the nature of the dispute. As Bob was getting at, the landowners have already won. They've already won on this matter. And what the appeals court was put out about was the state essentially trying to delay something that has now been clearly stipulated that they owe. They're just trying to play a delaying tactic.
And I will say, in defense of the Attorney General's office and DOT, this is a fairly complicated process of filing the plats and deciding what's the fair market value of these properties, which ones are we actually going to take or we don't need. And there may not be the resources at DOT and at the AG's office to move very quickly on this.
But that's not the landowner's problem.
That's correct.
I
mean,
that's where the legislature, this was a common sense decision.
Yeah.
John, let's move over to the redistricting case. Now that the special master has submitted the maps, and the three-judge panel, it's up to the three-judge panel now. Is this case over, or are we going to have further?
Oh, no. It's not over. In fact, as far as I can tell, and talking to people who practice in this area and have followed these kinds of cases, I've been saying on this show repeatedly how puzzled I was that the special master was drawing maps, but there's no ruling. There's actually no ruling from the three-judge panel that says why the previous maps are illegal. Why would they do this? Because as soon as they issue a ruling, then that's going to get appealed to the Supreme Court, who's going to very possibly put a stay on the whole thing. And they're trying to delay this as long as they can and get these other maps in place. They've got the cart before the horse. This is not over yet. You can make an argument for the special master's maps. You can make an argument against them. The problem is we don't know what the criterion is for why the special master's maps would be better, because the three-judge panel has not issued a ruling.
Cash, this has some real implications because the filing period for the 2018 elections is due to begin in February. If John is correct, and this thing is going to be hanging around for a while, is it possible that the filing would have to be delayed?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's just something that John left out. The hearing for, like, the special master's deadline was December 1st. The hearing for it is scheduled for January the 5th. So that means then that whatever happens thereafter is definitely going to run into February, one way or the other. So the answer is yes. It's going to throw that off entirely.
Oh, my goodness. Dennis, another one of the cases that I think we have talked about before, but is anything new going on in the lawsuit between the State Board of Education and the Superintendent of Public Instruction?
Not since I think the last time we probably talked about it on the show. Not a whole lot. I'm going to ask Justice Orr to keep me a little bit straight here, but I think that
it is sort of his wheelhouse.
But I will say that right now, as I understand it, the case is trying to get around the Court of Appeals and go straight to the Supreme Court based on the last ruling that the three-panel judges made at the trial level. So that is yet to be seen, and I think that's where it was the last time we talked about it.
Is that pretty accurate?
Well, there is, but there are actually two cases. There's one involving the Rules Review Commission, which the Court of Appeals in a split decision has ruled on, and that case has been appealed to the Supreme Court. And there's somewhat of a similar issue or constitutional interpretation necessary in both of the cases. So in the case involving the superintendent, what the State Board is doing is asking the Supreme Court to bypass the Court of Appeals. Let's get both cases up there. The other one's already there. It makes sense to get a quick resolution for both of those.
Now, John, talking of court cases, the legislature meets again in special session in January. Do you expect at that time we're going to see new judicial districts being proposed by the legislature?
There are certainly members that want to proceed on that, as I understand it, but there are also members that want to do this with all deliberate speed. In other words, everybody grants, I hope, everybody grants the judicial districts are screwed up. They're way out of whack,
right.
They're way out of date, they have to be redone. So it's really a debate about process and time.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, Cash, this again falls into the situation so far as the filing period for elections.
Keep in mind, though, that they've eliminated the primaries, the judicial primaries for May, so therefore they don't have to worry about that. So it's a question of what do they decide? Do they go with redistricting, or do they go with merit selection? We won't know till they get into office.
And very quickly, Bob, what about the proposed constitutional amendment to change the terms of judges?
To 2 years, that's got to be dead in the water. It's a crazy idea. Former Representative Skip Stam said they're just rattling the saber.
It was not a serious
I mean, it's a terrible idea. But real quickly on the judicial districts, we need to talk about what constitutes a good judicial district. And nobody's been talking about the criteria, whether it's purely population.
Well, let's take it to court first, and we'll figure it out later. Isn't that the way we're doing things here?
Well,
as we come to the close of the year and look forward to 2018, we also want to tell you NC Spin is moving to a new network that will air our shows. Beginning January 19th, you can watch NC Spin on UNC TV as well as the North Carolina channel. We'll air Friday nights at 7:30 p.m. and again Sunday afternoons at 12:30 on UNC TV. And we'll continue to talk about issues affecting our state with your favorite panelists, But don't forget, beginning January 19th, we're moving to UNC TV. We hope to see you there. You'll still get balanced debate for the Old North State. And you can check into ncspin.com or ncspin on Facebook. When we come back, we'll talk about the skills gap.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Agriculture is the backbone of our state's economy. It's the heartbeat of our rural communities. Its strength means bustling sidewalks and open signs in store windows. And with smart investments in our future, like the Plant Sciences Initiative and modern updated research stations, agriculture will remain the cornerstone of our economy. Because when agriculture is strong, our economy is strong.
For more than 45 years, the North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association has advocated for local and state government retirees. Whether protecting retiree benefits or fighting for cost of living adjustments, more than 70,000 members count on us to be their voice. Government retirees work for us, and we stand for them. Learn more at ncrgea.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
How would you like a job that pays $100,000 a year? Ingersoll Rand in Davidson says they have 1,000 job openings and no qualified applicants. Ingersoll Rand makes Trane air conditioning and club car golf carts, but they're finding a skills gap with workers needed to help in manufacturing and servicing the equipment they make. Dennis, this company's not alone. We aren't preparing our workers for today's blue-collar jobs, many of which are high-paying. Why isn't this being emphasized more in our schools?
I think there are a couple of major reasons why, Tom. First of all, you have the people that are in high school, say, and the teachers aren't encouraging them to go into blue-collar jobs. They're all pushing them to go to a four-year college. You need a four-year college degree if you're going to be successful. And this is a reputation that's hard to shake by the blue-collar jobs that are out there. And secondly, these jobs went offshore, but they came back, and they're coming back because of automation through technology.
And cost of shipping and transport.
And cost of shipping and transporting. And so with that, the training of those people for blue-collar jobs sort of got put on the sidelines, and they started talking about getting people in four-year colleges. Well, here's an opportunity for the community colleges and the community colleges in collaboration with our high schools to retool the thinking on that, because $100,000 for a blue-collar job is not out of the question anymore.
I was going to say, Cash, a good HVAC technician makes in the high five figures, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. But I think Dennis is onto something. Why is there sort of a stigma about blue-collar jobs?
Never mind that. Where do I sign up? I think the stigma, if you think about it, a number of years ago, we had many of these major manufacturers who were in these rural areas to up and leave and go to other countries, as you indicated, where the labor is cheaper. A lot of those folks who were older lost their jobs and have not really been able to recover since then. Now, as you say, some of these companies want to come back. They're looking for people to train. They need younger people, but a lot of those younger people have left those rural communities and left the state and gone someplace else, and the schools have not picked up the vacuum. So it's a vicious cycle.
Bob, Dennis mentioned the community colleges, and I think they have traditionally been the ones who have helped in training these new workers. Community colleges are complaining about the fact that they don't have adequate funding to be able to pay professors and the equipment they need to be able to train people. Why isn't the legislature willing to step up to the line here?
Well, it's like everything else in education. There's a fixed amount of funds to go around. Higher education wants its share. The public education system wants theirs. And community colleges have been a little bit of a stepchild in that three-legged stool model. But I've got to say, we need to do a better job culturally in telling people, take pride in a so-called blue-collar job. You don't have to be a professor or a scientist to have a great career.
And there are a lot of college graduates right now that are looking for jobs that can't find them. John, this skills gap thing is pretty important. Just this past week, CNBC, the cable network reporting business news, predicted North Carolina is going to get the Amazon second headquarters. You hearing anything related to this?
I'm hearing that we're in the running to get the headquarters. So it's like everybody else. I'm not as sophisticated as these guys, who I will note both are wearing blue collars. So they're predisposed to believe this. And I agree with all of this, Tom. However, I would just give you a slight caveat. If you go back 10 years to the 2000s, or 20 years to the 90s, or 30 years back to the 80s, you will find stories, because I've run across them, about how blue-collar jobs are stigmatized and employers can't find people who are well-trained. This is not a new problem. This is a pre-existing problem. There's always a little bit of a gap in the economy.
If that is the case, why haven't we done anything about it?
Well, I think the argument is that there are attempts to do something about it, and not all the young people will take up the opportunities that are offered, even when they are funded.
Dennis, we talked about the Amazon headquarters, but we understand that we are in the running, along with Alabama, for the Toyota Mazda manufacturing plant that is going to be located here. Could be a big win for our state. What are the prospects of winning both of these people, both these jobs?
Well, I'd like to think North Carolina could best Alabama in recruiting that industry. I think we have, in my opinion, Tom, a better than even chance because of the things that North Carolina can offer to a company like Toyota and Mazda. And I'm hearing positive things, so keep your fingers crossed. It's anybody's game.
But Cash, we note that in September of this year, Wisconsin paid Foxconn some $3 billion in state and local tax breaks. Is North Carolina ready to step up to the plate for one or both of these? With
Republican-led legislature, I doubt it. And I believe I'm sitting next to a man here who has always said, don't give it to them. Just have them come and open for business. Don't give them a dime.
I don't think any of us like the economic
incentives. If you agree with me, you are right.
I don't think anybody likes the economic incentives game, but that's the game we're in, isn't it, Bob?
Well, it is the game, and I wrote the dissent on the Supreme Court that said they were unconstitutional. The majority didn't agree, and we've been giving away money ever since.
That was the Moretti case.
The Moretti case, yeah. But it is the world we live in, and I don't think there's any question that a huge car manufacturer would be a huge asset to the state.
I won't just say this, Tom. I do think the legislature and I think they'll step up, and I think the reason is these are really once-in-a-lifetime opportunities for the people of North Carolina. I do think they will do what it takes to get them here. Let's hope they will.
They just don't want to lose. They just don't want to lose to Alabama, and I don't blame them.
That's right. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about North Carolina being the best state for business.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
With today's tools, all the information you need is just a click away.
I'm going to show you how to remove the...
And as a member of an electric cooperative, you have access to lots of valuable tools. Tools that help you do it yourself when it comes to controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad. Discover how your electric cooperative can help you control your energy use at empowermenc.com.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today, I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
Forbes magazine just listed North Carolina as the #1 state for business in the nation. In noting the repeal of HB 2, which hurt our listing last year, Forbes says North Carolina has built one of the country's strongest business climates over the past 2 decades, fueled by low business costs, incentives, and a young, educated workforce, many of whom have been trained at the strong universities in the state and Research Triangle Park. Migration rates in the state are among the highest in the U.S. annually. Cash Forbes noted that the Movement Advancement Project, which tracks whether states are adequately protecting people from employment discrimination based on sexual or gender identity, ranked us much higher than in 2016. Is this the result of the repeal of HB 2? And in fact, has it been repealed?
Well, that second question, I'm not so sure. I keep hearing backwards and forwards about that. We'll find out. But the Advancement Project, they listed this state in 2016 as being hostile to sexual orientation or gender identity policies. If you go to their website, and they have a website or a site for each and every state as far as policies related to the LGBT community, North Carolina is literally at the bottom of the barrel. So the answer is yes, HB 2 definitely had something to do with our ranking then.
Bob, they listed our state as among the highest in the nation for in-migration, people moving into our state. We know a lot of retirees are coming here, but what do we know about the demographics of any of the rest of them? Are a lot of working age people moving into North Carolina, and if so, why?
I don't want to be a no-growth guy. It's a great place to live, but they're pouring over the state line like we were giving away money. I mean, it is incredible, the growth, and it's people from college graduates from Ohio who just want to come live in North Carolina. I mean, I feel like I'm doing a promo for tourism and economic development.
I'm getting ready to break out, and I like calling North Carolina home in just a second.
Yeah, I could sing, but I won't. So.
Dennis, it wasn't listed in the Forbes report, but I'm curious, what factor do you think the tax reforms that our legislature has passed over the last few years had in this ranking?
Well, I think it had some positive impact on the ranking, particularly in the corporate tax rate. Our tax rate in the corporate area was a little bit high, and them lowering that, I think, helped send a signal to the country and to the global economy that we were going to do better in terms of our tax rate in the state.
So, John, what's your takeaway from this Forbes report? I mean, how's this going to benefit us?
It's a good headline. It's not particularly meaningful in a statistical sense, and it's important to keep that in mind. North Carolina has been ranked high in these kinds of measures most of the time for decades.
Yeah.
And the
last 6 years.
The truth is that these, and I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade. There's no question that the tax reforms and other things that were mentioned in the report as part of that business cost indicator. All that having been said, whether you rank high or not on some of these measures has an unclear relationship to actual economic performance. For example, North Carolina was clearly, comparatively, having a stronger economy in 2016 than it is now. Now, you know, you could invent all sort of hokum and political garbage about that, but it just happens to be the case. So it is not true that the ranking system necessarily predicts future economic activity.
All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you, not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
Now we come to the part of the show many of you have been waiting for, when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. John Hood, I'll start with you.
According to recent census data, Tom, 40% of births in North Carolina are to unwed mothers. 40%. That's actually an improvement. It's a slight decline over the last 2 years. We got to go up much further to get back to a point where that does not create all the social consequences. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not gonna do that. I know lots of stories about this and experience about this, but lots of educational and social pathologies are attached to children growing up without fathers in particular. And in the 50s and early 60s, that rate would have been in the single digits. This is a tremendous change in our society, and I'm not sure the government can do anything about it, but we all have to work together to try to solve it.
Bob Orr, tell us something we don't know.
We talked at the beginning of the show about these cases pending in our court systems, most of which involve state constitutional questions. And we're getting ready in 2018 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Reconstruction Constitution. And nobody's doing anything. This is the basic document that we still operate under today, and yet I've seen nor heard anything about state government or the courts going back and looking at a remarkable occurrence in 1868, a convention of native Southerners, but freed slaves, carpetbaggers, whatever, but it was a unique document.
Cash Michaels, tell us something we don't know.
Something that people should know: 2 open enrollment deadlines. Thursday, December 7th is the deadline for Medicare. If you are 65 or older, then you need to make sure that you sign up. And then Friday, December 15th is the deadline for the ACA, the Obamacare. Sign up for that. So those 2 deadlines right in our tracks.
All right. Dennis, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, as you know, we have a quarter of our children who still live in poverty in this state. Almost 60 years ago, a young governor named Terry Sanford saw a vision where he wanted to tackle that issue by starting the North Carolina Fund, and it focused on children because Terry Sanford knew that if he could break the cycle on children, there would be less than a 10% chance that they would start a new cycle of poverty going forward.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when a truly great panel is going to be discussing health care in our state. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.